The Souza Baronowski prison in Shirley remains on lockdown after yesterday's fight that injured several guards.
September 18th, 2024, a correction officer walks through Massachusetts' most dangerous prison during morning rounds. Surveillance cameras capture the moment an inmate strikes from behind. Within 6 seconds, 2 more join in. 16 stab wounds later, the union releases the footage to every news station in the state. Yet the brutality isn't even the most shocking on our list. Here are the most brutal prison gangs caught on camera.
Newly released video of a prison attack this week shows just how brutal this incident was. The violence at Souza Baronowski Correctional Center left 5 officers injured.
16 inmates at the Souza Baronowski prison are now facing charges for this attack that injured 4 corrections officers.
The maximum security prison in Lancaster, Massachusetts had a problem. Inmates were getting their hands on metal strips from educational tablets, sharpening them into weapons. And nobody knew until it was too late. 6:20 a.m., Officer Stephen Adams walks between tables during routine morning rounds. He's just doing his job, checking cells, making sure everything's secure. Then an inmate standing in a cell doorway makes his move. The surveillance footage shows exactly what happened next. Adams is struck from behind. Before he can react, a second inmate joins the assault. 6 seconds. That's all it took for this to turn from a routine morning into a nightmare. Within 60 seconds, a third inmate jumps in. The weapons are crude but effective. Sharpened metal strips fashioned from those educational tablets the prison handed out. Adams tries to defend himself, but he's outnumbered and caught completely off guard. By the time backup arrives, Adams has been stabbed 16 times. One of the wounds punctures his lung. A second officer is stabbed in the head. 3 more officers are injured, trying to stop the attack. The Massachusetts Correction Officers Federated Union didn't wait around. 2 days later, they released the surveillance footage to the media. Every major news station in Massachusetts ran the video. The message was clear. This is what happens when prisons are understaffed and inmates have too much control. The 3 attackers were identified as Jose R. Crespo, Heriberto Rivera Negron, and Jeffrey Tapia, all members of the Latin Kings, all facing charges of mayhem and armed assault to murder. But here's what really scared people. The statistics that came out after the attack showed that assaults on staff had jumped from 118 in 2021 to 187 in 2024. Weapons recovered went from 52 to 186 in that same period. Governor Maura Healey ordered a full security review. Officer Adams survived, but he'll carry those scars for the rest of his life. And somewhere in Massachusetts, corrections officers watch that surveillance footage and wonder if they're next.
Ely State Prison remains on lockdown for the 4th day after a gang fight left 3 inmates dead.
July 30th, 2024. 2 rival prison gangs are about to turn a Nevada prison yard into a war zone. And this time, the guards are going to watch it happen. Ely State Prison in White Pine County, Nevada, houses some of the most dangerous inmates in the state. Maximum security, high-level gang members, the kind of place where tensions run high every single day. On this particular day, approximately 20 members of the Sureños, a gang affiliated with the Mexican mafia, came prepared for war. They fashioned homemade shanks. They wore papers, books, magazines, and extra clothing as makeshift body armor. Their targets, members of the Aryan Warriors, a white supremacist prison gang. At a coordinated signal, the attack began. This wasn't a spontaneous fight. This was an execution. Anthony Williams, 41 years old. Connor Brown, 22. Zachariah Luz, 43. All 3 were members of the Aryan Warriors. All 3 were targeted. All 3 died from multiple stab wounds. 5 more inmates were critically wounded. Several had to be airlifted to trauma centers. But here's the part that made everyone furious. The surveillance footage showed something disturbing. Prison staff watched through windows from what's called the bubble, a secure control area. They watched for approximately 11 minutes before entering the yard. 11 minutes. By the time pepper balls were fired as a warning, 14 seconds had already passed since the attack began. By the time officers actually entered the yard to help, 3 men were dead and 5 more were bleeding out. The video obtained by 8 News Now investigators sparked outrage. Families wanted answers. Why did the guards wait so long? Were they scared? Were they understaffed? Or did they just not care? 20 defendants were charged with murder, attempted murder, and gang enhancement charges. In November 2025, Anthony Rivera, 34 years old, was convicted by a White Pine County jury on all charges. Nevada's response was massive. They swapped nearly 2,000 inmates between Ely and High Desert State Prison. Ely was redesignated from maximum to medium security. But none of that brings back Williams, Brown, or Luz. And none of it erases those 11 minutes captured on camera. The Aryan Brotherhood doesn't forgive, and they definitely don't forget. August 14, 2016, John O'Sullivan walks into his cell at Maryland Correctional Institution in Jessup. He's 43 years old, a ranking member of a rival gang called Dead Man Incorporated, and he's months away from being released. He just needs to grab his shower things after recreation time. Simple, routine. Except nothing about this day is routine. Joseph Leisler, the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood in Maryland, had given an order. O'Sullivan needed to die. It was retaliation for an assault on another Aryan Brotherhood member at a different prison. 3 men were assigned to carry out the hit: Vincent Bunner, Calvin Lochner, Brian Hare, all loyal soldiers, all ready to do whatever it took. When O'Sullivan entered his cell, they were waiting. The surveillance cameras captured everything. The 3 attackers surrounded O'Sullivan with homemade metal knives. He fought back. He tried to run. He made it out of his cell and sprinted toward the control booth, desperate for help. It didn't matter. By the time correctional officers arrived with pepper spray, O'Sullivan had been stabbed and cut 54 times. 54 wounds. He died right there in Building F. The investigation was straightforward. The video evidence was damning. The paper trail of gang communications was clear. This was an ordered hit from the top. Joseph Leisler, the mastermind, was found guilty in August 2021. Life without parole, plus an additional life sentence and 40 years concurrent. Vincent Bunner was convicted in 2020 of second-degree murder, 30 years consecutive. Calvin Lochner, same conviction, same sentence, 30 years consecutive. Brian Hare took a different route. He pleaded guilty and testified against his co-defendants. He got life with all but 20 years suspended. O'Sullivan's family got no justice that felt adequate. Their son, their brother, their father, gone. Stabbed 54 times while cameras watched, months away from freedom. The Aryan Brotherhood sent their message: cross them. And it doesn't matter if you're weeks, months, or years from release. They'll find you, they'll kill you, and they'll make sure everyone knows why.
Thurgood and 2 men identified as Anthony Williams and Tarek Goycochea walk into a cell. 6 minutes later, Williams and Goycochea walk out and then back in. Williams drags Thurgood out of the cell. Then Goycochea drags him. Thurgood is beaten and allegedly stabbed 52 times.
April 15, 2018. A simple robbery in a South Carolina prison cell is about to spiral into the deadliest U.S. prison riot in 25 years. Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopville is the largest male prison in South Carolina. It's overcrowded, understaffed, and filled with gang members from rival organizations, Bloods, Gangster Disciples, Crips, all living in close quarters. 7:15 p.m. in the F3 housing unit, Gangster Disciples member Damonte Rivera decides to rob Blood member Michael Millage. It should have been quick. Get in, take what you want, get out. Instead, Rivera stabs Millage to death. Within minutes, a Blood member retaliates by killing Rivera. And just like that, the prison explodes into chaos. Armed inmates rush toward the Rock, the common area where gangs settle scores. Violence spreads like wildfire across F5 and F1 units. Homemade weapons appear from everywhere: shanks, shivs, anything sharp. For the next 8 hours, Lee Correctional becomes a war zone. Over 80 prison CCTV cameras document the carnage. They have blind spots, but they catch enough. Inmates attacking each other with brutal efficiency. Some victims are stabbed nearly 100 times each. Here's what made this riot especially dangerous: contraband cell phones. Inmates coordinated attacks in real time using smuggled devices. They called allies in other units. They planned ambushes. They turned a chaotic situation into organized gang warfare. Correctional officers were completely overwhelmed. SWAT teams from outside agencies didn't regain control until after 3 a.m. 7 inmates died that night. 22 more were injured, many critically. The aftermath was massive. 29 inmates were indicted in December 2020. 47 total were charged. As of late 2024, over 20 have been sentenced. During the trials, prosecutors played the surveillance footage. Jurors watched hours of gang violence. They saw Michael Juan Smith and Stephen Tank Green coordinating attacks. They saw inmates hunting down rivals. South Carolina's response was financial. They approved $92 million in prison security investments. 48 inmates were immediately transferred to a private prison in Mississippi. But the families of those 7 dead inmates? They got nothing but grief. Their loved ones were killed over a cell robbery that went wrong. 8 hours of violence that should have been stopped in 8 minutes. All of it documented on camera. All of it is preventable. The Catholic Church made a terrible mistake. They thought a papal visit would bring peace to one of Mexico's most violent prisons. They were wrong. February 11, 2016. Pope Francis had visited Topo Chico prison in Monterrey, Nuevo León, just days earlier. He'd officiated Mass with 700 prisoners and their families. Photos showed inmates smiling, hands clasped in prayer, grateful for the Pope's blessing. Mosso, night that same week, those same inmates hacked each other to death with homemade weapons. Topo Chico wasn't just a prison, it was a cartel stronghold. Los Zetas, one of the most feared criminal organizations in Mexico, controlled the facility. But even within Zetas, there were rival factions. On one side, Juan Pedro Zaldivar Farias, known as Z27. On the other, Jorge Ivan Hernandez Cantu. Both wanted control. Both had loyal soldiers. Both were willing to kill to get what they wanted. At midnight, the violence erupted. The surveillance footage obtained by Mexican news magazine Proceso showed the horror in real time. Dozens of inmates fighting in the yard, bodies being dragged, weapons swinging. 49 inmates died that night. 12 more were critically injured. Investigators later recovered the arsenal used in the massacre: 60 hammers, 86 knives, and 120 shivs. Let that sink in. 120 homemade shivs in a single prison. The facility held 3,700 inmates in a space designed for 3,135. Only 100 guards were responsible for controlling thousands of cartel members. The Pope's blessing meant nothing. The prayers meant nothing. Inside Topo Chico, the only law that mattered was cartel law. 3 men were arrested immediately: the warden, the superintendent, and a guard, all charged with murder. The investigation revealed what everyone already suspected. The cartels didn't just operate inside Topo Chico, they owned it. Media footage showed inmates on rooftops after the riot, shouting, celebrating. Relatives gathered outside, demanding information about their loved ones. Many wouldn't get answers for days. The international coverage was brutal. Here was Pope Francis, representing peace and redemption, visiting a prison that would turn into a slaughterhouse within days. The optics were devastating for Mexico's government. But for Los Zetas, it was just another Tuesday. 49 bodies, 120 weapons, 0 justice. Welcome to Mexican prison life. Some prison guards break up fights. At California State Prison, Corcoran, they organized them. For 5 years between 1989 and 1994, Corcoran wasn't just a maximum security facility. It was an arena. Guards deliberately placed rival gang members, Bloods, Crips, Mexican Mafia affiliates, Northern and Southern California Hispanic factions, in small exercise yards together. Why? Because they wanted to watch them fight. Guards allegedly placed bets on the outcomes. One supervisor reportedly announced fights like a ring announcer. They had front row seats to gang violence, and they treated it like entertainment. When fights escalated too far, guards would shoot inmates with 9mm rifles. April 2, 1994, Preston Tate was placed in a yard with rival gang members. Everyone knew what would happen. The guards knew. Tate probably knew. When the inevitable fight broke out, Officer Christopher Bethia shot Tate in the head. Tate died instantly. This wasn't an isolated incident. Corcoran had more guard-inflicted inmate deaths than any other U.S. prison during this period. 7 inmates killed by guard shootings. 50 more shot and wounded. The cover-up lasted for years, but whistleblower guards finally came forward in 1994. They couldn't stay silent anymore. They told the FBI what was really happening inside Corcoran. The FBI investigation led to the discovery of 187 surveillance tapes. These tapes were gold. CBS Evening News broadcast footage in November 1996 showing an inmate being fatally shot. CBS 60 Minutes did a full segment in March 1997. They discussed the cover-up, the betting, the complete corruption of the system. In February 1998, a documentary called Maximum Security University used prison surveillance tapes to show 4 fights from 1989 to 1993 that ended in fatal shootings. The footage was damning. You could see guards deliberately creating dangerous situations. You could see them waiting for violence to erupt. And you could see them shooting inmates who were just doing what the guards wanted them to do: fight. 8 guards were indicted on federal civil rights charges in February 1998. In June 2000, after a 9-week trial, all 8 guards were acquitted. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. But the civil lawsuits told a different story. Preston Tate's family received an $825,000 settlement. Vincent Talumas, who was paralyzed for life by a guard shooting, got $2.2 million. The scandal even inspired a 2008 film called Felon. MSNBC's Lockup series did episodes on Corcoran in 2003 and 2005, digging into the facility's dark past. But here's the sickest part. Those 187 surveillance tapes weren't supposed to exist. They were supposed to be destroyed. Guards were supposed to record over them. Someone didn't follow orders, so Mayoni kept the evidence. And because of that, the world learned what gladiator fights really meant. 7 dead inmates, 50 wounded, 8 guards acquitted. And somewhere in California, those tapes still exist, showing exactly what happened when guards turned prison yards into death matches. February 23, 2021. Most prison riots happen in one place. This one happened in 4 prisons simultaneously. 79 inmates died before noon, and the gangs proved they had more power than the government. Ecuador's prison system was already a powder keg. Overcrowded facilities, minimal security, gangs linked to Mexican cartels running operations from inside the walls. Then in December 2020, a major criminal organization leader was killed. That death triggered a power struggle that would turn Ecuador's prisons into slaughterhouses. 9:30 a.m., coordinated attacks began in 4 prisons at once: Penitenciaria del Litoral in Guayaquil, El Turi in Cuenca, La Tacunga Prison, and one other facility. Together, these prisons housed 70% of Ecuador's entire prison population. The gangs involved, Los Choneros, Los Lobos, and others, launched their assaults with military precision. They had knives, they had homemade weapons, they had a plan. At one facility, 18 bodies were found dead, heads separated from bodies, limbs off. One prisoner broadcast live on social media moments before he was killed. He knew what was coming. He wanted the world to see it. Police body camera footage released by NBC News showed officers attempting to regain control, using tear gas. It wasn't enough, not even close. Cell phone videos filmed by inmates showed graphic violence. These clips circulated on social media before authorities could stop them. Photographs verified by AFP showed dead men with blood-stained torsos, some decapitated. Human rights lawyers downloaded massacre footage and used it as evidence in constitutional court. They argued the government had failed in its most basic duty, keeping prisoners alive. 79 confirmed deaths in a single day, across 4 prisons, 200 miles apart. President Lenín Moreno declared a state of emergency. Soldiers and special forces were deployed to prisons across the country, but it didn't stop. Since February 2021, over 400 inmates have been killed in 7 major Ecuadorian prison massacres. The violence got so bad that in January 2024, Ecuador's prisons were placed under military control. Here's what's terrifying. The coordination required to attack 4 prisons simultaneously means the gangs have communication networks the government can't intercept. They have resources the government can't match. They have loyalty the government can't buy. 79 bodies in 4 prisons, 18 at one location, 1 live-streamed execution. Ecuador's government lost control of its prison system years ago. February 23rd just made it official. July 29th, 2019, 16 men are about to be executed in a Brazilian prison. Guards will film it on cell phones from the safety of the roof, and by the end of the day, their heads will be kicked around the yard like footballs. Centro de Recuperação Regional de Altamira in Pará, State, Brazil, was a disaster waiting to happen. The facility was designed for 163 to 200 inmates. It held between 343 and 450. Only 33 guards were on duty. The National Justice Council had warned just weeks earlier that the facility was in terrible shape. Nobody listened. 7 a.m., members of Comando Class A gang allied with Primeiro Comando da Capital, stormed the wing controlled by their rivals, Comando Vermelho. They came prepared. They set fire to mattresses. They blocked exits. They conducted systematic executions. The poorly designed prison allowed fire to spread rapidly through the Comando Vermelho section. Inmates who weren't died from asphyxiation. For 5 hours, CCA gang members hunted down their enemies. 16 men were decapitated. 46 more died from smoke inhalation. Cell phone video taken by guards showed prisoners on the roof brandishing knives. Smoke billowed behind them, and on the ground, in the yard, something unthinkable was happening. The heads of the 16 decapitated victims were being kicked around like footballs. Guards filmed this. They had cell phones. They recorded the horror. And later, that footage would be used as evidence of just how far Brazil's prison system had fallen. TV news cameras outside the prison captured smoke rising from inside. Emergency vehicles surrounded the facility. Family members gathered, desperate for information about their loved ones. 62 total deaths, 16 by decapitation, 46 by fire and smoke. The 10 main perpetrators were transferred to federal prisons, but President Bolsonaro showed zero sympathy for the victim. When journalists asked him about the massacre, he told them to ask the victims of those who were killed in there what they think. Translation: he didn't care. These were criminals. In his mind, they got what they deserved. 4 more inmates died during transport to another facility after the massacre. The National Justice Council's warning about the prison being in terrible shape turned out to be the understatement of the year. Altamira became a symbol of everything wrong with Brazil's prison system: overcrowding, understaffing, gang control, and absolute brutality captured on cell phone cameras by guards who could do nothing but watch. 16 heads, kicked like footballs, filmed by guards. That's Altamira. January 1st, 2017. New Year's Day was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became the start of a 17-hour that ended with street vendors in Manaus, Brazil, selling DVDs titled FDN VPCC The Massacre. Complexo Penitenciário Anísio Jobim in Manaus, Amazonas State, was home to some of Brazil's most dangerous gang members. On one side, Família do Norte, allied with Comando Vermelho. On the other, Primeiro Comando da Capital, also known as PCC. The rivalry had been building for years, but on New Year's Day, FDN decided to end it permanently. 9:30 p.m., FDN gang members took 12 to 14 guards hostage. Then they launched a systematic hunt for every PCC-affiliated prisoner in the facility. 74 prisoners were taken hostage by the attacking gang. Some were released, most were executed. For 17 hours, FDN members shot, stabbed, and murdered their enemies. Some victims had their hearts torn out. Others were their bodies thrown over prison walls where media cameras captured the aftermath. Security forces didn't enter during the riot. It was too dangerous. They waited outside while the killing continued. Prison CCTV captured the initial moments before inmates destroyed the cameras. But cell phone footage recorded by inmates during the massacre told the complete story. And here's where it gets truly disturbing. Within days of the massacre, street hawkers in Manaus were selling DVDs. The title, FDNVPCC, The Massacre. The content, compiled footage of the recorded by inmates on smuggled cell phones. People bought them. They watched 17 hours of murder edited into a highlight reel. They saw decapitations. They saw dismemberment. They saw exactly what happens when one Brazilian prison gang decides to eliminate another. Security Secretary Sergio Fontes called it the worst prison massacre in the state's history. 56 prisoners were killed, many decapitated and hearts torn out, bodies mutilated beyond recognition. The aftermath was swift. Gang leaders were transferred to federal maximum security prisons. 17 inmates were prosecuted. But the real impact was nationwide. The Manaus massacre sparked retaliatory attacks across Brazil's prison system. By the end of January 2017, over 130 inmates had been killed in prison violence across the country. One massacre, one prison, one night, and the ripple effect killed over 100 more. The DVDs sold on the streets of Manaus disappeared eventually. Authorities cracked down. But for a brief window, you could buy footage of one of the most brutal prison massacres in Brazilian history for a few dollars from a street vendor. 56 dead, 17 hours, sold on DVD. February 14th, 2012, Valentine's Day. A fire breaks out in a Honduran prison. Guards hear inmates screaming, trying to escape. The guards respond by shooting at them. 361 inmates burned to death. It became the deadliest prison fire in recorded history. And it's all captured on video by a civilian 200 meters away. La Granja, officially called the National Penitentiary in Comayagua, Honduras, was 55 miles north of Tegucigalpa. It was designed for 250 to 500 inmates. On Valentine's Day 2012, it held 852. Over half of those inmates had never been convicted of a crime. Many were jailed simply for having gang tattoos under Honduras's Mano Dura anti-gang laws. MS-13 members, young men with ink on their skin, locked up without trial. When fire broke out that night, it spread fast. The building was old, overcrowded, poorly maintained. Inmates trapped inside began screaming. They banged on cell doors. They begged guards to unlock them so they could escape the flames. The guards couldn't find the keys. Or maybe they didn't want to find them. Carlos Alfredo Garcia Zepeda was 200 meters away. He pulled out his camera and started recording. He submitted the footage to CNN iReport. The video captured flames consuming the prison, smoke billowing into the night sky, and the screams of trapped inmates, clearly audible from 200 meters away. But the air was something else on that recording, something that made everyone who heard it sick to their stomach. Gunshots. Guards were shooting at inmates trying to escape the fire. Firefighters delayed entering the building because they heard those gunshots. They thought there was an active shooting situation. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late for most of the inmates inside. 361 men burned to death. Some were found in their cells, locked in, unable to escape. Others died trying to break through barriers. A few made it outside but were shot before they could reach safety. The screams on that video recording are haunting. Men begging for their lives, men watching their cellmates burn, men who knew they were about to die. President Porfirio Lobo suspended prison administrators. The US ATF sent agents to investigate. The UN called for an independent investigation. By the 2013 anniversary of the fire, not a single person had been criminally charged. This was Honduras's third fatal prison fire since 2003. 69 died in La Ceiba in 2003. 107 died in San Pedro Sula in 2004. 3 fires, 537 total deaths, zero accountability. The Comayagua fire wasn't just the deadliest prison fire in history. It was a symbol of everything wrong with Central American prison systems. Overcrowding, corruption, violence, and complete disregard for human life. Many of those 361 men who died were never convicted of any crime. They were locked up for having tattoos. They were awaiting trial. They were kids who made mistakes and got caught up in anti-gang laws designed to look tough on crime. And when fire broke out, guards shot at them while they burned. Carlos Alfredo Garcia Zepeda's video is still available. You can still hear the screams. You can still hear the gunshots. 361 voices silenced forever. All of it was documented on camera from 200 meters away. That's the #1 most brutal prison gang incident caught on camera, not because of gang violence, but because of what happens when guards become executioners and a prison becomes a crematorium.